Hello, my name is Veronica McCulloch, and this is my presentation on evidence-based practice. And what I chose to do is the developing reading comprehension among students with mild intellectual disabilities, an intervention study. The reason I chose this is because I teach students with intellectual disabilities, and I also teach reading. A little bit about the study. The research question here was to show the impact of two types of text talks on reading comprehension among adolescents with intellectual disabilities. Well, what did this really mean? It meant that there were two different types of teaching strategies that they used, reciprocal and inference teaching. The two people who did this was Ingevar Lundberg and Monica Reichenberg, and they were with the University of Gothenburg. The participants that were used in this study, there were 40 students, 26 boys, 14 girls, and all of them were intellectually disabled, but there were a few with labeled with autism and a few labeled other things, but the majority were intellectually disabled. These kids or students were ages 13 through 18. And prior to the study being done, they had only been exposed to independent reading of student choice books. So all they would do is choose the book, and then they were asked to retell the story of what they read. And that's the extent of the reading strategies that were used on them before this study. Strategy number one was reciprocal teaching. It focused on a technique that relied on prediction, generated questions, clarifying, and summarizing. Before this, a little research was done on students with intellectual disabilities. A reciprocal teaching example, I thought it might be important to show you what an example looks like so that as I describe it, you go, oh, okay, this is what they were doing in the study. There were two distinct strategies they were teaching. One is a reciprocal teaching strategy. The first one was this is if you were in your classroom and you were doing this strategy, you would predict, read, clarify, ask questions, and discuss, and then sum it all up as a group. So an example of that would be the teacher and the students read the first sentence silently of a passage. And then the teacher and the students take turns asking questions about the sentence. The students ask questions first, and then the teacher answers with the book closed. The students close their books and the teacher asks questions. So this is very, very important. So they predict, they read, they clarify, they ask questions, and they discuss it. And then as a group, you sum it up. So some important tips whenever you are thinking about doing the reciprocal teaching style, it is important that they don't answer that they don't know. Reason for this is all about critical thinking. They have to be able to stop and think about what it is that they are doing. If a question is not clear, for example, they're doing the ask questions and discuss portion. If a question is not clear, then it has to be clarified by the group or by the teacher. And the person who answers the question should always be ready to justify their answer. A huge piece of this is being able to understand why they came up with the question that they did for the other students so that they could help them figure out what was going on in their brain. Then they use the inference teaching. Okay, and inference teaching focuses on three things: what I know from the text, what I already know, and that equals my inference. So mostly it is we need to get some answers. We add up clues that we already know or we have already read, And there is more than just one right answer. So some kids, it's really, really neat to see their brains think differently. So one kid might think one way and then another kid another, and then they go, oh, that is the coolest thing. It's like a light bulb that goes off. And the most important part about this too with inferencing is that you have to support with evidence. So some important tips. The student needs to back up the answer with why they think this and encourage creativity. There are no wrong answers in inferencing. That's the coolest part, is that they do get to be creative. The results of this study. So out of the two strategies used, the reciprocal strategy proved to be more effective. And as you saw, there's a lot more steps there. They have to predict, read, clarify, ask questions, and discuss, and then sum it up. So it's a lot more complicated and complex. They tested them before and after, and the students in the reciprocal strategy study scored higher. And the students in the reciprocal reading strategy group also were capable of more critical thoughts. What does this mean for me as the teacher of special needs students with intellectual disabilities? It's not just enough to ask them to tell me what they think will happen next. That's just not enough. There's got to be more steps so that they can foster some creative and complex thinking. So it's important to incorporate questions that they think of and ask. And being able to talk in their groups and summing it up together. All of that is so important. Students definitely learn more talking to their peers than hearing me stand there and talk. That's why it's important that you have them talking with you. It's like an interactive conversation, and it's not just one-sided, tell me what you learned. They are bouncing ideas off of their peers, and so it just makes it that more engaging. And also what is interesting and what I learned from this is critical thinking can happen for any student. Just because a student is nonverbal or has an intellectual disability, it does not mean at all that they are incapable of critical thinking. Thank you.